Welcome to this session on retrofitting and building and sustainable housing. My name is Rachel Owens. I'm co-director of the National Retrofit Hub. We are a non-profit community interest company that brings together all of those working in the retrofit sector to collectively share their insights, overcome known barriers to retrofit at scale, work together to collectively scale up retrofit and address many of the issues that we're facing with housing. I'm going to do a quick intro and then introduce you to our fantastic panel today. We're going to answer some questions that we've already been discussing, but it'd be good to hear as well if anyone in the audience has questions. So please do think about if you have questions, and we'll come to you at the end. So we know that improving housing can be a solution to so many of the societal challenges that we're facing, not only reducing people's bills, but also really improving their health, which is associated to all of those impacts of their homes, providing climate resilience, and also reducing carbon emissions. But the scale of the challenge is huge. 44% of homes are still below an EPC of C, and we know that those homes that are achieving a C still aren't working for many people, still aren't decarbonised. 15% of homes fail the decent home standard, which means that they have a health risk, which can really detrimentally impact someone who's living in that home's health. And also, really apt today, in a 2-degree warmer world, which we're fastly moving towards, 90% of UK homes are at risk of overheating. So we know we've got a big challenge ahead of us. And we know that the impacts really do influence people's lives. They really do mean that people are making the tough call between heating and eating in their homes. But at the same time, we've seen retrofit projects that are already delivering fantastic benefits to people. I'd really recommend having a look at the testimonials on some of the sites like People Powered Retrofits, like National Energy Foundations, and you'll see people there talking about not only how their homes are more comfortable, but also how they feel listened to, more in control and more safe in their homes. And we also know that we're in this massively changing regulatory landscape. The Decent Home Standard is being updated and it's going to apply to the private renter sector as well as social. MEES is being upgraded and it's going to be applied to the social rented sector. We've got Arab's Law, which is really trying to tackle damp and mould and other health hazards, and the Warm Homes Plan coming out, which is introducing extended and new funding and finance to make all of this work. So we know what we need to do. And we know the outcomes we want to achieve. But the big challenge for us here today is scaling up, how to make this economically financeable, how to make the business case, and how to deliver quality at scale. So today we're going to hear from some people who are doing just that. So I'd like to introduce you to Simon Bones, who's CEO of Denius, Andrew Spencer, who's Strategic Solutions and Partnerships Director at Equans, and Isabel Smith, who's Head of Sustainability at Atrato. First up, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a bit of an introduction. What's your role in retrofit and sustainable housing and decarbonisation? So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Simon Bones, Chief Executive of Genus and also of Cotswold Energy Group. Previously, I used to run a management consulting firm, but have gone to the good side. And also a published academic in climate change science. Genus is a tech-led retrofit business focused on the able-to-pay market. So we're generally helping people who are not in receipt of government funding, apart from BUS, to retrofit their homes, be that insulation or heat pumps or solar or batteries or other things. And Cotswold Energy Group is an installer. So we work from everything from funded social housing projects through to schools and hospitals and large blue chip corporates. So we're working on decarbonisation of buildings at all sides of the area.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Spencer from Equans. I am Strategic Solutions and Partnerships Director. My role in retrofit is simply to move our business and the UK, hopefully, from ambition to delivery at scale. And that's across retrofit, heat, power, and also place-based decarbonisation and regeneration. For my role, it runs across strategy, innovation, and implementation of the above, essentially. And Equans is a end-to-end player, so we play across the whole of the value chain. And we've got colleagues here from our consultancy business that make up the entirety of the front row there. So please ask that. Any questions there? And we have all the way through to delivery and essentially the maintenance of those assets long term and managing the performance of that. So for me, retrofit is not necessarily a technological one anymore. It's a systems issue. And therefore my role has been concentrating on unlocking the financial barriers, but also the system issues that lie there around delivery.
Hi everyone, my name is Isabel Smith. I am Head of Sustainability at Atrato Group. Atrato Group is a investment platform. We focus on asset-backed investment strategies across the UK and Europe, with a specialty in commercial real estate, social housing and renewables. In my role as Head of Sustainability, I'm responsible for sustainability at the Atrato Group level and then at the fund level as well. We are the investment manager for a listed REIT called Social Housing REIT. And that is a fund that owns a portfolio of almost 500 properties across the UK, providing homes for almost 3,500 residents. And that's focused on specialised supported housing, so providing homes for residents who have care or support needs, either mental or physical care needs. And we have embarked on a program of making sure that our homes are sustainable, fit for purpose and future-proofed as well. And we've developed a specialised EPC upgrade program to help with delivering that, which I'll talk further about today. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. So first up, we've got the Warm Homes Plan. Amazing. MEES is going to be upgraded to a C. It's going to be applied to the private and social rented sector. So we've got everything we need now, right? We're good to go. Are we? Is that it? Are we ready, or is there anything missing? What does that gap look like between what we've got in terms of policy and where we are right now? Do you want to comment first?
Yeah, so I think, Warm Homes Plan is out there in the sense that it's been published, but there's a lot that still hasn't been thought through. So if we're looking at the funded space, that's further developed. But if we're looking at unfunded, the nebulous money that's going to be spent on no and low cost loans for consumers, no one really knows what that's going to look like. And of the 24 million homes, about 20 million of them are not social homes, and a large proportion of those people cannot afford the typically £20,000 it costs to retrofit a property across heat pump, battery, solar. So I think that funding is a key issue that, again, we'll probably talk about a little bit more. I think there's still aspects of legislation that have not been well thought through. I probably won't talk about that right now. But the other thing is that even when people do know that this money is out here, and most people don't, they don't really know what to do. They don't know who to get to do it. They probably don't know how to finance that. And we spend a lot of time at Genus, although we're a digital platform, so most people just go through on the web. When we do speak to people, they're lost. They don't know what to do. And we need to be better as an industry at helping them to understand what to do, where to find the funds, and how to get it done.
Thanks. Andrew, how do you stand on this gap and system awareness? And is that what we need?
I think, I should say, we think really is policy's been driven around compliance. So I should say things have gotten a lot better, as you said in your introduction. The MEES come in. We now have ties into health through Hours Law. There are ties into energy security. So things have gotten a lot better than they were 5 years ago. But what it hasn't done at the moment is look for a mass rollout of this across the UK. And that is what is required. So I believe it sits in a few key areas. One is around the delivery capacity and capability. So in the UK, we have between sort of roughly 250,000 to 500,000 jobs that are required to carry this out at scale. The capability of that at the moment, especially in the sort of PAS 2035 roles, is lacking, with a lack of funding behind that also. So that delivery capability in the UK requires a lot. But what I will say, if the right system is put in place, the private sector will come and meet that need, is where we believe. Secondly, around the funding at the moment, as Simon said, the funding space is fairly good. I would argue a lot of my clients would say that it's been a nightmare actually achieving some of that funding. And actually, this boom and bust system that we have in the financial funding in the social housing space has caused a lot of the pipeline issues that is not allowing that delivery capacity to be built in the UK. And lastly, I suppose, around that pipeline bit is also around demand as well. I think, there is a lot of news at the moment that net zero isn't the right thing to do, and we shouldn't be doing it. And as professionals, we need to be aware of that and empathetic to that piece a little bit. So for me, when we're talking about retrofit in the UK, we don't focus on carbon as the main sell, let's say. We focus on the health benefits that are being achieved from this. We focus on the financial benefits. And the work that we've been doing with some of our clients, so around Dudley Net Zero, for example, Net Zero Neighbourhood, has been focused very much on that longer term ambitions of a place. And some of the things that we've been working on is around thematic modelling in that space and bringing this in through monitoring and verification to prove that the system is working. And we've seen very good results. So I think whilst policy is part of the picture and it's still not quite there, I believe in the UK we can do this, and we are as long as we have a stable pipeline and stable policy for the next few years, we will be on in this section.
How about you, Isabel? You mentioned you've got an EPCC strategy, but where do you find the gap between the policy and the strategy that you need to deliver?
Yeah, look, I guess from a private finance perspective, it's very helpful to have certainty. And we're very lucky that our investments are long-term investments. Our leases are typically to approved providers for 20 plus years. We want our residents to have warm, comfortable homes for the long term. With our EPC upgrade program, we developed our initial budget for the program based on Eco4 funding support. And that was obviously factored into our multi-year budget plan. So obviously changes like the scrapping of Eco4 has impacts for us. The replacement with the Warm Home Scheme, as touched on, there's still some kind of working through the weeds, I guess, on what the implications of that mean for us. But ultimately, what is helpful is the policy setting around MEES, having a minimum EPC rating, whether you agree that EPCs as the metric is the right one or not. It has given us something a bit longer term to work towards. And we've actually tried to be more ambitious with that as well. So we've developed our EPC upgrade program around completing all of our upgrades by 2028, so in advance of the 2030 target timeframe. But it is very helpful when policy provides certainty to allow that finance flow. We're undeterred by the changes and are committed to ensuring that we will hit our EPC target by 2028, and our plans are unchanged. But yeah, I guess that's one of the hurdles is when things change, it's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, and I imagine that forms quite a concrete part then of your business case when you're making this sort of proposition to those people within the business that need to really sign off the budgets. So it sounds like, you're all doing fantastic work in this space, even though there is this gap. And what we're seeing from the sector is that there's loads of great work happening, but we do need to scale it up, but without compromising quality. So what do you think is needed to achieve this scaling, and how is your organisation tackling that challenge? Maybe I'll start with you first, Andrew, this time.
So to the demand point, really. So first off, understanding the true value in the system. It's not just carbon, and really highlighting that to drive that scale and that demand. What we've tried to do as a business is highlight that, especially around the health issue at the moment. And there's so many co-benefits in that area. That will drive the pipeline. So the work that we're doing isn't just focused around carbon. That's got to be really clear. Secondly, around the financing funding element. So for us, we like to use a blended financial approach. So we know there's not enough system. We spoke about the funding there in the warm homes. That is not enough to happen. So how do you access that private investment? And that is through unique commercial models such as energy as a service, for example, or heat as a service in that space. And there's plenty of things that I could go into in that area, that how we do that. But essentially that can bring private capital into your portfolio schemes. We need to stop looking at this as a project by project system, and that is driven by the funding to date. And actually coming up to a portfolio level will drive that scale, drive that pipeline, and they're all interconnected in that space. So for me, it's the finance, it's the pipeline, it's the delivery vehicle. They all need to be working in harmony to drive that scale going forward. If one is missing, it doesn't work, and it does need everyone to communicate. And ultimately, that's not going to be done by one person or one organisation. That's going to take multiple organisations collaborating together. And that's where we see ourselves as that sort of, hopefully, that integrator, and we can support in that space. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we've had a lot of drivers that have helped in building out our EPC upgrade program. So it started first as a pilot, which was very successful, and then we managed to get board buy-in to expand on that, and a formal budget allocation of over £2 million set aside for that. So we did target as a portfolio-wide approach, and for us, it was about also achieving other outcomes at the same time. So warmer, drier, more comfortable homes for our residents, being able to engage more closely with our approved providers and care providers as well, delivering on our broader strategy of sustainable homes, and the development of this EPC upgrade program has coincided very nicely for us with us setting our first formal and science-based approved emissions reduction targets, of which the EPC upgrade program is a key lever for us to achieve those emission reduction targets. So there's a lot of kind of intertwining outcomes here that help our broader sustainability strategy to be delivered. Building on the pilot program, so just in 2025, we were able to see 38 of our properties upgrade their EPC ratings, and just in that year alone, we got to 71% of the portfolio at zero above up to 77% of the portfolio at zero above. So we're also seeing measurable improvements, which is also really helpful for us when we're engaging with stakeholders. Importantly, our investors, our board, our residents, registered providers, everyone they're engaging with in this program, to be able to show the improvement that we're achieving to continue to deliver at that scale.
Just to come back on that, I know when we were having a bit of a chat before this, we were discussing how lots of projects end up having, we see lots of pilots and lots of things get stalled at the pilot stage, and it seems like you're already doing the work to translate those pilots into full-on programs. Were there any particular challenges with making that leap, or were there things that you needed to have in place to make sure that you could then expand that pilot and start rolling it out across the whole of your stock?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, in my role particularly, is a lot of collaboration with our investment teams and our asset management teams. So this strategy really came out of our asset management teams who are on the ground conducting property inspections and have that direct engagement with registered providers and care providers on a day-to-day basis. And it became clear that for us to be able to hit the minimum EPC requirements, we were going to need to put some investment in behind this. So building out that business case was a very collaborative effort amongst different members of the team. Ultimately, we have a strong sustainability and impact committee as part of our board governance. And the proposal was able to get board support, and that obviously really helps when you have that engagement and can build a strong business case. And as I said, it then links in really nicely now with the further work that we've been doing on our emissions reduction targets, and that nice overlaying of various different work streams starting to deliver joint outcomes.
Thanks. And I know, Simon, you're probably working with some other different tenure and ownership types, which might have quite different levers to scaling. What's your sort of view on how we scale up, and particularly thinking about some of those sectors that maybe aren't well served by existing policy or strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, we work through both what I could categorize as people where stuff is done to them, and I say that in a good way because we do it, but and those people who want to do things for themselves. And I think the markets are very different. So as you say, and as we've heard before, in terms of the things where we're deciding what should we be doing for people, there are certain things that need to happen. I think there are two specific things that I would point to on the people who just want to do this for themselves. So one of those is the advice. And if you read documents in this space, it would seem like there's an obvious right answer for every property, and there simply isn't. It's a different thing for different types of property, for different types of owner, for different types of motivation. There are very few people who really understand how retrofit works, how the economics work, how the carbon impacts work. And it's really hard to get advice. I mean, I've been running just a stall here today, and probably at least 20 people have said, that's really helpful. I didn't understand how any of that stuff works. And these are all people who are involved in this space, who have an interest here, but it's very hard to get good information. And I would argue strongly that government should not be the provider of that information. I think they'll do it really badly. Of course, I would say that because we provide that type of information, but I'm also right. So the provision of advice at scale is important. And because not many people understand this, that means it has to be digital or digitally led, with escalation where that's required. We're not going to be able to have an army of call center people able to advise on this. I don't think we're going to be able to train up enough people in time to be experts on this in the short term. So how we use digital tools to improve the quality and improve the access of advice, I think is really important. Obviously, kind of what we do. The second thing, as I said, is that finance cuts across all of this. And if you think the right price point is about £20,000, and for some people it's less, but that is what a normal home requires for a solar battery, heat pump, a couple of add-ons. Most people just don't have that behind the sofa. So the question is, how do you deliver that? And you've got about 13 million owner-occupiers. We've talked about MEES, where private sector, that should happen as a result, and social housing as well. But for those 13 million people, about half of them have a mortgage. The really obvious thing, and I deal with most mortgage companies in the UK, is most of them neither know nor care about the space. They should do. And there was a time when they had to, because amazingly, under the Conservative government, they were targeted of APC average for their portfolio by 2030. Those rules got taken away, so they're no longer in place. But most mortgage lenders are the obvious source of capital for owner-occupiers, and currently they make it... Did they make it difficult? They certainly don't make it easy for people to borrow more money to do what they need to do to lower their bills. And if you can borrow at 4% through your mortgage and make 8 to 10% back through a retrofit, that makes financial sense. If you have to borrow at 10% on a personal loan to save 8 to 10%, it doesn't make financial sense. And as Andrew said, I think there's a relatively small number of people who are obsessed about the carbon. For most people, this has to save them money. It has to make their homes more comfortable. So we've really got to unlock finance. And that's where we're waiting on the Warm Homes Plan for what it means for these low-cost loans. I don't think there's enough money earmarked for it. But how are we going to enable mass market adoption of something that is fundamentally the same price as a car? That's a big cost, and I don't think anyone's really thought through how that's going to work. So I think if we can unlock finance, we can unlock advice. We still have all the issues we've talked about around delivery and the skills and capability, but I think that's really important for that able-to-pay space.
that really chimes with which the organisation did a study that they launched last week, which was all about attitudes towards heat pumps and adoption of decarbonised heat. And they were looking at what impacts people's perceptions and what would make people more likely to be able to take on the risk that's associated in the finance. And they found that additional borrowing on the mortgage was one of those areas that people felt most comfortable with, because it's a bill that they're already paying. It's a system that they already know about. It's a lack of uncertainty that comes with it, and it feels like a safe sort of choice. So I think also really it makes financial sense, but also is something that customers are more likely to accept and want. So there's some interesting research there if you're interested in sort of consumer attitudes towards heat pumps. That go and take a look. So we know that finance is often called out as a key barrier. We've already been discussing this. So what else can we do to improve the the business case for retrofit and decarbonisation? And I'm going to come to you first, Isabel, sort of that strategic level and business case.
Yeah, so I think I touched on the fact that our EPC upgrade program is part of our broader sustainable homes pillar of our sustainability strategy. And for us, that means not just focusing on EPC upgrades, but also nature, positive solutions for our homes, creating more green space where we can on properties, and also looking at climate risk. And I think that's really an interesting point to flag today, given we're talking about warm homes, but actually I think for most people today you would be hoping to be going home to a cool home instead, and for us that means that we take very seriously our obligations to review climate risk over our portfolio. We've been utilising different technology platforms to be able to conduct analysis of areas in the country where our properties are located that might be under more extreme heat risk in future, or other risks as well, flood risk, for example. So EPC upgrades is just one of many things that we're focusing on with sustainable homes, and that target around 2028 for us in advance of 2030 is just one of many kind of milestones that we're working towards as we build out that strategy. But I think we've found, and I touched on this before, that really important role of collaboration, making sure that you get engagement from different key stakeholders when developing these business cases. So for us, that meant getting the investment teams, our fund manager, really engaged in what all this actually means in layman's terms. I think it's easy in sustainability to run off into acronym territory without actually explaining what we're really talking about. It helped for us actually to just call our program what it is, which is an EPC upgrade program. We had a lot of debate about what to call it, whether it was to be called sustainable future homes or green homes or warm homes, but actually we just decided to focus on that was the key target that we were aiming for with 2028. So let's just call it what it is on the tin with that. And it sits under that broader sustainable home strategy. So that helped.
Thanks. Simon, what else do you think is needed to make a better financial business case for some of these works?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'll probably focus more on the able to pay space on the basis that if you're not paying for this, it's a great business case. But if you are paying for it, I think I'd say a couple of things. So one is that the business case is very variable depending on your type of property and what you do. So we talk in Genus about intelligent retrofit, which is about doing the right things and not all the things you could possibly do. And we were talking about this before in terms of how far you want to push things like insulation. But it's very easy to spend money badly here and get a bad return. I would again argue local authorities and registered providers have probably done quite a lot of that over the last 20, 30 years. And actually the technology has moved on. So doing stuff that is sensible, I talked about heat pump battery, and solar, putting the right number of solar panels in, not having too big or too small a battery, sizing the heat pump properly, running it at the right flow temperature, those can really change the business case. So I think the first thing to say is that it is very sensitive, and if you do it well, then it's very different from if you do it badly. The second thing to say is that the business case is much better than most people think it is. So if I talk to people, and I try to talk to a client at least once a day, most people think that retrofit is something you do for the nobility of it. It doesn't save you money. most of the retrofits we do are between 8 and 14% return, and that comes off your energy bill, so it's after tax, which if you're a top-rate taxpayer is the equivalent of a really good investment. Very few people know that. Most people who get told it don't then believe it. But actually, once people do, and we work a lot with rich people, they get really excited about this because it's like, oh, this is brilliant. I can save a ton of money and it comes off my bill and Rachel Reeves doesn't get any of it. Oh, and she's going to give me $7,500 from bus. Even better. Actually, it's just people don't know that that's true. People don't believe it. People are skeptical. People don't understand what's going on. And that's why saying earlier about advice, I think there's a real opportunity for us to demystify this process, that it's not all about putting sheep's wool insulation into your house and living with the thermostat dialed down to 16 degrees. You can have a more comfortable home that costs you less, that saves you carbon, and that's just nice to live in. The only thing is, unfortunately, you've got to find a way to fund it, and that's where we keep coming back to.
And I think that really shows that for many people, the language looks different. So the way that you just described it then, you don't hear many people describing it as an investment in that way. And for some people, that will really trigger what will make them act. For others, it might be around the health of their home or the way that they're living, or making it comparable to a lifestyle choice. And for many others, it might be about carbon. So I think it's finding the right message for the right people a lot of the time. Andrew, what do you think on how you help your clients make the business case for all of this?
Yeah, exactly. But you just touched on it. It's the wider benefits and the total value in the system that needs to be understood. And one of the things, and one of my colleagues will kill me if I don't say this, but what I'm really passionate about is around devolution and what that can unlock at a place level. And when I talk about portfolios, I'm not just talking about the portfolio of homes. This isn't just a built environment issue. This is an infrastructure issue across the UK, and it needs that. This is a complete corporate buzzword, but it needs a holistic approach right from the system down, and actually understanding the benefits that retrofit has on the entirety of the system. That then you can start to see the true business case for this. So actually, retrofit from an energy security point of view is really, really important to the UK. And that's why we're starting to see investment coming into this space from UK PLC, so the National Wealth Fund, GBE. So for me, those puffins are driving the investment, not just because of the carbon savings, but all those additional benefits that come along with it. And for the work that we've done on our net zero neighbourhoods and our other area-based schemes is starting to show those additional benefits, such as health. We're now having conversations with Treasury around healthcare budgets in an area, so you can keep people in their home for longer. They're not got damp and mold in their property, therefore they don't have the same health issues. So for us, I'm really passionate around that piece. The other side of this is not just about what we do in retrofit, but also how we do it. So we can drive a local workforce to deliver this scheme and bring UK economic benefit from retrofit. And that's what I'm really passionate and really drives me around this, because it's when we start talking about it at the property level, it's brilliant. That's what people care about: comfort, bill saving. But actually at a national level, that's why we want our politicians to care about this. This isn't, when we have to open the newspaper or flick on the news and someone's saying net zero is dead or net zero is not worth a waste of time, I can tell you the benefit that it has to these people and the place is worth caring about.
We've been doing a lot of work over the last year on place-based approaches to retrofit, and we really see that as a massive lever for not only doing more of this work, but doing it in a way that meets the needs of people in their places. So there's a few resources on our website if you are someone working at that place-based level, if you're a local authority, a local community group, an organisation, an SME, where we've looked at what types of organisations do you need to bring together? How can you create a strategy which is co-authored by the organisations and stakeholders in that space, by understanding the building stock you've got, understanding the local needs, understanding who's already out there that can help you with this work, and then how do you help support that and fill in the gaps. And I think advice, as we mentioned before, is a massive part of that place-based strategy. And we have a lot of people in our network who are advice providers, and we think a lot of the time what they do is not valued anywhere near as much as it should be. So we're really hoping to see the new Warm Homes Agency interface more with existing advice providers who are already doing great work there.
Can I just comment on that as well? So one of the key pieces of findings from our net zero neighbourhood in Dudley was that whilst that advice is coming from people like myself or Simon, or yourself, Rachel, but the key is actually that community-centric approach. They listen to people that come from that place and come from that area. And that has been a key point of learning from there, that we need someone from the local area to be driving this so they have a common voice and a common language.
I think we're already coming on to this, but my final question before we go over to you as the audience is, we know that finance is a barrier. It gets talked about a lot, but we think there's a much wider one around general sort of citizen demand for this work, and whether that looks like opt-ins for when work is being done in a place, or whether that looks like encouraging people to invest their own money. We've done some sort of research around the components of citizen demand, which I might talk a bit more about. But yeah, I wonder what each of you think around that we haven't already mentioned that's needed to build that demand for this upgrade work. Simon, I might put you first.
I'm not sure I have the answer to this question, but it's a good one. So let's say there are a couple of things that are unhelpful. A lot of people say to me, yeah, but I live in an old house and a heat pump doesn't work in an old house. Or they say, yeah, they read a certain newspaper, and I'm not going to say which one of the three it is, but they think heat pumps are the work of the devil and solar panels are ugly and we shouldn't be covering the countryside with them, even though it's their own homes. That stuff is really unhelpful. It's generally bad science, it's bad economics, it's bad everything else, but it doesn't get enough pushback. We probably get bored, and I include myself in this, in debunking that and explaining why they're wrong, but people do believe in it. I think the other challenge that we do face, although I talked about the positive economic benefits case for retrofit, is it does require you to do quite a lot. And if one of the things that we haven't really talked about specifically, but heat pumps, electricity is too expensive and gas is too cheap. And while that is the case, heat pumps are a hard sell unless you can put that with a battery, with solar, with time of use tariffs. I think citizens will care more about this when they can see more back balance value to it without having to do the whole thing at once, because although I would say the right thing to do is probably to do all those things, for many people that's too much disruption at one time. They don't have the budget for it. They never will have the budget for it. They want to do bits and pieces. So getting people to see that this is something that's good, and it could be, as we've heard before, around the health benefits, it could be around carbon, it could be around the economics, but making that easier to understand and not having people sniping at the side saying, oh, a Labour report says heat pumps will push your bills up, which isn't true. I think all of those things are important. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to prepare for that question, so I'm going to pass on to someone who has.
Either one of you is fine.
So I guess there's two sides of this. And, we work in the social sector quite heavily, and we delivered 20% of the total warm homes funding on behalf of our clients, so quite a large number of that. What I would say is where there's a funded market, the uptake is quite high. When we've also started working quite heavily on the local authority grant scheme, and where there is a payment, the uptake is much less, I should say, in the private sector homes. So for me, that community-centric approach, so like I said earlier, that what's been successful in Dudley is showcasing that. So what we did on the Dudley scheme, which was an area-based, we created a show home in both the private sector and the social home, and the uptake there, so they can actually look and feel that. And that was done in a void property by Dudley Council. So for me, that was a real positive from that piece and getting the uptake. We also partnered on that scheme with Keele University, so they bring in the educational sector into that space. And they were creating mini groups around that space and that green space. So talking about sustainability much broader than just retrofit, and that really got interest from tenants. And one of the things that came out of that was around the active travel aspects around that and the green space, and that's what they were really passionate about. So that actually changed some of the funding scope on that scheme to actively involve that. So the uptake changes very, very drastically when you're looking at both. And me and Simon were talking about it. We talk about the able to pay market, but actually I call it the willing to pay market. You need to make retrofit actually understandable and worthwhile. It's not widgets that we're selling. We are selling, like I said, comfort, better health and things like that.
We feature the Dudley project as one of the case studies in our place-based guidance that we've just recently published. And one of the things that really struck me was that it feels like that work has been achieved because there are absolute superstars working in the local authority. I remember asking, I think it's Helen from the local authority, "Oh, what does your team look like? Who's managing this project?" And she was like, "Oh no, it's just me, and this isn't even my main job." And it's people putting so much effort in, and it does make you realise if we actually put capacity into those types of organisations, we could do so much more. But they've done fantastic work there around sort of building that momentum in the green space and then bringing people along the journey to get to then the homes around the green space.
But that is why I believe in that place-based model, and local authorities being the driver behind that, is that they are so passionate about changing the places that they live in, and that is key. There's so many to call out on that specific project, but for me, that the key across the country that I see time and time again when I go and speak to our clients is the passion that they have for place. That, when I used to be in the private sector, the passion that they have about their business that they want to make, that's where you need to hit, really, for me.
Isabel?
Yeah, I guess it's clear there's lots of different approaches to retrofit, and the right approach needs to be dependent on what your specific strategy is. But for us, working in specialised supported housing, we need to be very resident-centred, and that means creating as minimal disruption to our residents as possible. In order to do that, we've been trying to target properties in the kind of sequencing of our upgrades, targeting those properties that may be empty for a period so that we can cause no disruption, understanding or engaging with our registered providers and care providers to understand which properties would be best for us to target first based on resident need, and just working really closely with all the stakeholders involved to ensure that as we carry out the works, there is minimum disruption. But I did just want to touch on the earlier point around that broader value creation, because I think it's really it's a really important one to stress that when we talk about retrofit, it is all of these other value creation aspects. I mean, we've got properties across the entire spread of the UK, so anytime we're carrying out EPIS upgrade programs, that is creating local jobs and employment, and then all the other add-on layers, more comfortable homes for our residents, reducing emissions, reducing bills. It really does, when you start to add up all the different value levers there, create a lot of impact, more than meets the eye, I guess.
Amazing. Anyone in the audience have any questions? You want to put your hand up and I can bring you the mic? Yeah? I'll make my way over. Do you want to introduce yourself and then else?
Yeah, all the time. Hello, my name's Owen. I'm a director at Four Seasons Energy. And I think it was touching on what Andrew said earlier about that we need the capacity to deliver retrofit at scale, and we're currently not there. So as a qualified teacher and retrofit assessor, I go into schools and deliver programs to educate about the retrofit careers, but also that awareness around the retrofit measures, like Simon was mentioning. We need to build that people-based approach. But do you think we're doing enough within the education sector to teach about retrofit?
I can go, no is the simple answer to that. I think that this isn't just the retrofit sector. This is construction-wide or infrastructure-wide. I'd say at the moment it's not seen as a sexy career, if I can say that, and it's seen as a very male-orientated career at times. And actually, for me, we need to change the perception of that very much at a high school level and throughout the STEM career for me. So no, we're not doing enough is the answer there. How to change that comes from a stable pipeline. So once you have a stable pipeline in place that comes from the funding and from policy, you can then bring the private sector to drive that engagement. And then once that happens, the colleges and the high schools all come along on the journey, but it needs that stable pipeline, which we haven't got yet. But I am hopeful, like I said, the devolution deals that are being done in the Northwest and in the West Midlands at the moment, they are starting to see that. So if I go to a slightly different area, a retrofit, and we've got an R&M contract for Birmingham City Council, for example, that is a 10-year contract that allows the private sector to invest into that city, and we're investing in training and local job creation in that space, but also in the sort of third sector in that space as well to bring us along. But it needs that pipeline, and it needs the public sector and private sector to work in harmony and create these portfolios, like I said, to drive that.
Yeah. Can I just add, because I think the pipeline is almost the shorter term piece. The longer term piece, which I agree with, by the way, but the longer term piece, which again I touched on earlier in the politics, is if you're looking at a job where you've just seen a load of people laid off because Eco4 gets cancelled, and you've got Nigel Farage writing to the chief exec of Octopus Energy saying, "I'm going to screw you guys if I come in," then that makes it difficult for people to make a career in a sector. And I think the narrative that we've been talking about today around making retrofit something that is an inevitability because it's the right thing to do, because the business case supports it, because the health benefits support it, and even Nigel Farage is actually not going to be able to turn this stuff off, let's hope. I think that will be key to getting people in, because at the moment they just, if you live in Cardiff and you saw 60 people lose their jobs because CN went under, that's a difficult thing to deal with. And we need to show this is a career for the future, not just a career for the next 5 years.
There's a really great organisation called RAFT, Retrofit Action for Tomorrow, who go and retrofit schools. And when they're there, they do loads of engagements with the particularly primary school children, where they'll start with a radiator and they'll get them to follow the pipe work along all the way to the boiler cupboard, and then they'll talk about what's in the boiler cupboard, and they get so excited. But there are so many moments, like, for example, today, a number of schools are closed because they're overheated. We know that indoor air quality was a massive issue around COVID, but so there's so many opportunities when then in that school setting to engage. And it's not only about bringing people into careers, but also spreading that message further to the parents and then increasing demand that way, I guess, is really a sort of opportunity. Any other questions from the audience? I don't know if I can see any more hands towards the back. I don't think so. So maybe we'll end with, let's imagine. Oh, sorry. We have I don't even need to get up. Sorry. Go for it. Oh, we can't hear you. Maybe you do need this one.
Again. No. Hey. Thank you, the three of you, for your input. A question for you, but particularly for Michelle, that finance and the removal of risk, how important is that? How close are we to getting there so that people start to invest their monies in what we're talking about?
Finance for Isabel? Isabel's that?
Yeah. Are you not finance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, for our fund specifically, we focus a lot on trying to communicate with investors that value creation piece. So alongside our annual reporting, we publish an annual impact report that actually looks to quantify for every pound invested in social housing, we deliver £1.35p in social value creation. So continuing that messaging for us is really important, and we know that we can continue to build on that kind of impact story through quantifying the outcomes of our EPC upgrade program, not just the amount we're spending, but also then looking at the reductions in energy consumption, the associated then reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And those are all really, really powerful sustainability stories for us to be able to share with investors, because many of our investors are interested in investing for the long term and want to see outcomes beyond kind of their risk-adjusted returns, but broader impact as well.
Can I just add to that then? Simon mentioned how easy it is to negate what's going on through the press. People saying that it's expensive, it's going to cost them too much money. How do we turn that round? How do we make it? We're talking about things that are very obvious to everyone here and we're passionate about, but to the people in the street, to the people who struggle to feed their children, and they're occupying these homes, how do we convince them that this is worth doing and not to listen to the crap that we hear or read on the news and in the media?
I mean, it's very hard. There are a couple of things, I think. I mean, one is we just need to keep on telling people. We need to keep on providing tools that allow people to see what the benefits are. We need to have more of the, look at a heat pump, talk to someone who's got a heat pump, talk to someone who's got solar panels. We get a lot of people who come in, it's like, my neighbour's got solar panels and they rave about how great they are. And actually, as we've heard here, whether it's place-based or it's people you know or it's people you respect or it's case studies or whatever, the more that happens, the more likely you are to know somebody who's got that and who's had a good experience. At the moment, if you don't know anyone who's got a heat pump and you read the Daily Mail, you'll think they don't work because they can dig up somebody who says, I had a heat pump and I've seen one where I know that the heat pump cannot consume as much electricity as that man claims it used. It's not physically capable of doing it without exploding. But that doesn't stop him from getting his piece on the Daily Mail. So how do we get those little stories? I'm assuming here we don't build huge social media campaigns of positive stuff that government's not terribly good at doing this, and smart meters is a good example where they tried to do something that maybe was sensible, maybe wasn't, but they did it badly, too expensively, and it didn't work. So I think it's just taking each day at a time, taking each conversation at a time, getting more of these things out there, having people who understand this is nicer, my home feels better, my bills are lower, and I want more of this. And then it's encouraging the providers of finance to keep doing it. And to the point about investment, the other thing from the private sector investment, so we talk to buy-to-let investors, they are terrified that their landlords are going to have EPC properties they won't be able to rent, because if they can't rent them anymore, then they'll have to sell them and that will drop the price and therefore they might not get their money back. So it's persuading everyone in the system that this is something that is a good thing to do and is a financially sensible thing to do, and that it's actually not as big and scary as you might think it is. And the more people that have solar panels, the more people that have heat pumps, the more people that have good cavity wall insulation and not bad solid wall insulation, the more that those stories will get out and the more it will snowball. We're just at a stage where, regrettably, we're not quite there yet.
Andrew, do you want to talk?
I was just going to come into that. I suppose that. Oh my God, he's still here. I think we've relied on the truth for too long as well, that that's going to make sense out there. And we've lost the storytelling around this quite a bit. So we need to get better at the storytelling. I went to a really good presentation about a month ago on this, actually, the communication of sustainability. And the experts in the room will self-identify as that, I suppose. But one of the key bits are that you're knowledgeable around this area and you have passion around this area. One of the things that is often missing is actually the empathy for the naysayers as well. So, far too quickly do we say that they're on the wrong side of the fence. And it's around that storytelling and bringing them and showing them the facts and showing the reality, because we've just gone, the truth says this. Well, the other side have gone, that's black as white. And actually, we need to get better at coming back at this and really showing the case of this. And I openly admit, I've got friends that have sat on the other side of the fence and gone, this net zero lark is costing us far too much money. Well, I've had to come back and sit down to them and break it down and understand why this is a real good thing for the UK and you can turn it around. I just hope that gets done, not a story at a time, because we might be here for quite some time. I hope the political lens actually changes a little bit more. But
yeah, I guess just very briefly following that. I mean, I think if you take the chessboard analogy of a brain of rice on 1 square and 2, 4, 8, 16, it doesn't take very long to get a long way. It's just, for the first bit, it looks like there are no grains of rice on the chessboard. Forgive me if you had heard that story, but I do agree. The other thing I think that on that truth point that we do have to address is if you do retrofit badly, then some of those stories are true. If you put in the lowest coefficient of performance heat pump I think we can put in to get the bus grant is 2.75. Now, if you put a 2.75 times efficiency heat pump in, replacing an 89% efficient gas boiler, your bills are going up 100% of the time. So just don't do that. If we get people who are a bit dodgy, who try and put in a cheap heat pump, do it badly, do it without other things, then you do get these stories, and you have to say, well, that is right, but it's not because the heat pump's wrong. It's because that person chose the wrong one, they put it in the wrong way, they didn't install it properly. And actually that brings us back to a point we were talking about earlier, which is about the capability of the sector and the integrity of the sector and being able to do good work well specified, well designed systems that work well for people with what they need. And I think if we do that, then those edge cases of bad installs get more marginalized, and you don't get the kind of problem we had with eco, where you pick up specific examples of bad actors and you destroy a whole industry.
Isabel, do you want to come in on that before I come in?
I think we've touched on quite a good few points there, but I do think as well just the broader kind of geopolitical context at the moment in the energy crisis is hopefully making this storytelling somewhat easier, because at the end of the day, when the reality is and you open up your gas bill and it's skyrocketed, some of these truths do come home closer to the pocket, which matters for most people. So I think we're starting to get to tipping points where actually, the economic argument for net zero, for energy efficiency, for energy security, all stacks up on top of each other now.
And I guess finally, we're talking a lot more about health at the moment. I think health is, one of those bipartisan issues that everyone does care about. We saw how much everyone got back behind the NHS and the pride that we have in those systems. And there are some really interesting projects. Citizens Advice 1066 have got a really great referral scheme where they work in partnership with local GPs to be able to refer people to their warmer homes schemes in the area, so that they're identifying people who are at health risk and can provide them with more targeted support. And we're also seeing places like in East Sussex, they are developing their retrofit strategy, but that's actually being driven by the public health department of the council, because they acknowledge that it can help them overcome some of the health issues that they face in the area. So I think that's one of the stories that we need to be telling, but I totally agree. We all need to get better at storytelling. And I've seen some great examples of fantastic storytelling here today. So lots of inspiration to go away with. I think that is pretty much the end of our time. So please join me in saying a massive thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much, everyone.